right, everybody, welcome to NorCal Sports Network. And this is the same hat that Brock Purdy's dad wears. Chat loves it when Marty Lurie comes on.
Anytime you lose a game this time of year, when you can't go backwards, it's a problem.
All right, everybody, welcome on in. NorCal Sports Network teaming up with Even Year Dynasty Show. And we've got a special treat for you tonight. We've got Jesus Cano from Baseball America, formerly with MLB.com and the San Jose Mercury. And we're going to be talking Giants, minor leaguers, some of the top prospects, some of the unknown prospects. We're going to get the expert's view because he sees them a lot more than any of us. So welcome on in. And this show is brought to you by Chapman Law Group. Chapman Law Group, located in Marin, licensed in all of California. Make sure you give Chapman Law Group a call, 415-613-9483 for all your legal needs. Chapman Law Group, let them know NorCal Sports Network sent you. All right, guys, great to have both of you. And Jesus, good to have you. I saw you on down at the winter meetings, and I saw my wife is a Filipino, and I always I'm drawing a blank now. The reporter with the Giants,
Justice De Los Santos.
Yes, thank you, Justice De Los Santos. I saw you. I watched that interview, and I says, man, I got to get Jesus on. I've tried to get Justice on. Maybe I'll get him later after the show. Talk to you.
I'll make sure. I'll make it happen. I'll hit a JDLS. I'll let him know.
Yeah, I would love to have him on, especially I got that Filipino connection, with my wife and everything. So, but yeah, this is going to be fun tonight. Let's get right into it. Jesus is down here in Arizona where I'm at, and he gets a chance to go to see all these youngsters in the Arizona Complex League and the Arizona Fall League that just wrapped up a few weeks ago. And, in some of the instructional leagues. So tell us about your background. I know you went to Pittsburgh High, a rival. I made a winning field goal against Pittsburgh High about 80 years ago, 10-7. It was just inside the upright, but it was good. We won 10-7, and at Pittsburgh, Clayton Valley walked off victorious, and that was probably one of my better moments. But you guys were tough in basketball. I mean, basketball was tough. Yeah.
Which is like the total opposite now. It's always been a big football school, but I mean, the basketball program hasn't been strong in a while, but the baseball program surprisingly has been really good lately. Coach Marco Cartagena down there is doing a really good job with that Pirates program, really turned it around and given the program meeting. So Pittsburgh born, but grew up most of my life in Pittsburgh, California, the real Pittsburgh, the one without an H, the way it's properly supposed to be spelled. So I grew up there in Pittsburgh, and then spent all my childhood in Pittsburgh. I did my K through 12, Pittsburgh High School, Los Medanos College, and then ended up transferring to Fresno State, where I became the sports editor and the managing editor at the Collegian there, the student newspaper. During that time, actually, I got a job with the San Jose Mercury News. I was doing high school sports coverage for about 5 years before then, involved the Bay Valley Athletic League, the East Bay Athletic League, Diablo Athletic League, whatever it was. I was doing high school sports coverage.
That's awesome. The old DVAL, the Diablo Valley Athletic League. Back when I was there, and I know some of the schools have actually closed down, but we had Mount Diablo, Hudson Hill, Concord High, College Park, Antioch, Pittsburgh, Northgate, Clayton, and I think
Las Lomas.
Los Lomas was in the a different division. I can't remember what they were. They weren't in the back. I graduated in 1980. Like I'm aging myself. I know you guys weren't even thought of. But the Bay Area. My brother is he coached over 30 years at Diablo Valley College basketball. Men's basketball is the third winningest community college basketball in all of California. Over 600 wins. Is in the JC Hall of Fame in California. He went in with Tom Tolbert, actually. I was at the ceremony. It was pretty funny. Tom Tolbert's stories were hilarious when he was speaking. But and then my other brother, he played at Clayton. Then he played 4 years at Cal. And then he's been at coaching staff for Cal. So a lot of Bay Area roots there. I love hearing guys that are from the Bay Area. The only thing that I know we talked about in the green room that I'm going to give you a negative mark is you grew up an A's fan. And we won't hold that against you. Although, I like what the A's are doing right now, to be honest. I like their young guys a lot. So,
they have a really system, really good farm system, but don't want to talk about them too much. We're out here talking Giants. I will say it was looking at the introduction and everything. It felt like I was back home seeing all the 49er clips and all that stuff coming back to life. And then also hearing the Chapman Law Group advertisement. I was like, hold on. It's like I'm back home in the Bay Area down here.
There you go. There you go.
Fresh air to be down here.
All right. Awesome. Yeah. We're down here. We got a few guys down here that are from the Bay Area. Mark Graves, he's in the chat all the time. He's one of my moderators. He grew up in Petaluma, I believe, with who's the big guy from Petaluma? All of a sudden, the first base, is it the White Sox? I'm drawing a blank.
Was it Andrew Vaughn?
Is it Vaughn that's from, or is it who's the other guy I'm thinking of?
That's not White Sox.
Torkelson. Spencer Torkelson, right?
Yeah, Torque, yes.
Torque, yeah. Drawing blanks, yeah. Spencer Torkelson, I believe, is from it's either him or Vaughn. Torque. Okay, Mark Gray says Torque. Okay. Yeah. So
he was Cal Bear.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, Torque was Arizona. Never mind.
Yeah. It was Vaughn.
State,
Vaughn was the Cal Bear. Yeah. So was Jeff Kent, by the way. Jeff Kent was a Cal Bear, and now in the Hall of Fame. So, well, let's get into it. Let's talk about the minors. Let's talk about everybody, when we talk Giants minors, the number one name that comes up, and everybody knows Bryce Eldridge. There's a lot of content creators that are popping up all over YouTube right now, and a lot of them think the Giants should trade Bryce Eldridge. Cody and I think that's borderline blasphemy. It's like, unless you're getting an established star with 4 years of control.
Yeah, like if you were getting Ketel Marte, but it's clear Ketel Marte doesn't want to play in San Francisco. Earlier today. I think that's the type of trade that you send somebody like Elrich, but obviously it doesn't seem like it's going to happen unless he waives that.
Yeah. So who are you? If there's one prospect that you're like super excited, that when you watch him, you say, this guy looks like a possible. I mean, if you were saying, no one's a can't miss, but if you to label one guy that said can't miss, this guy's got all the tools, who would that be?
I mean, it has to be Josué Gonzalez. I mean, the Giants, one of their top signings in the past year for the DSL. And I mean, I got to see him in his stateside debut, and I'll tell you the story about it. I was scheduled to go watch the Brewers play that day in Maryvale. They had this pitcher who was of Taiwanese descent, and he was one of the few signings, believe it or not, one of the few Taiwanese signings in Brewers history to ever, sign with the club. So I was like, this is an interesting guy. I'm going to go take note of it. And I wake up that morning and I look at this this channel where it has all the lineups and stuff like that from the Complex League and just the instructs too. And I see Gonzalez J, and I was like, hold on. Leading up for the Giants, I was like, is this who I think it could be? And I texted a couple of people, and sure enough, it was Josué Gonzalez. So I still made my way to Maryville to go watch the pitcher for the Brewers play, but I only caught that inning, came back and saw Josué play, down at the Tempe Diablo Stadium Complex where the Angels play. And, just seeing him right away, like I told you guys in the green room, he was as advertised, and I think just being able to watch him play, the bat to ball skills are there. I mean, the bat speed is there. The defense is there. He's an elite defender, and a lot of people think that he has a true 70 glove at shortstop, and for such a young player too, being a switch hitter with an advanced strike zone, has a really good feel for his age. And I was able to see him, a couple different times then too. And I think when you look at a guy like him, with a body so raw, so young and still developing, he has an insane amount of pop than you would expect, like I think one vivid example, and I shared this on Twitter too, was Josué. There was a game down the street here at Papago where he hit an inside the park home run, and then he also hit an opposite field home run within the same game. And when I mean opposite, that's opposite it could get. Like, it barely missed the foul pole by a little bit, so that just shows the amount of pop that he has, and obviously with him being so young, there's definitely still time for him to develop. I hear that he's going to start in the Arizona complex next year to begin, but if he follows a Johnny level type of route, you could see him playing low A San Jose by the end of the year. So anybody living in the Bay Area, maybe at some point you'll get to see Joshuar, but for sure, you're going to be able to get to see him out here in the complex on the backfields and stuff like that. I mean, he's a guy who models his game after Francisco Lindor. It seems like that's this generation's, model. I've heard that with another players from, the Brewers prospect Jesus Mate also models his game after him. But I mean, this guy is can't miss. I mean, I know it's going to be years before he makes it up to San Francisco, maybe by 2029 or whatever, but he is going to be really good, a really good player for the future that I'm excited to watch more of as we get down here in the complex.
That's awesome to hear. Go ahead, Cody. I just wanted to say, you mentioned Lindor, and that's who I was wondering. I've heard those comps, and I was wondering if he looked like him. How old is Joshuar now? Is he 17 or 16? What is he?
Off the top of my head, I don't know if we have that info on top. It appears to be that he
just turned 18.
He just turned 18. So
okay. We see guys that make it at 20, right? We've seen guys that come up at 20. Is he a guy that could rise through the ranks and get here in 27, or you said 29? Can he get here in 28?
I mean, it's really far stretched. Like the Giants specifically aren't necessarily a system that likes to push their guys really fast, even in an age where we're seeing so many different players debut, specifically from the draft side within a year of them being drafted and playing in the majors. I feel like you aren't seeing that as much with there's a couple of prospects right now, like I would say Leo Debris, Jesus Mate, our trajectories to be able to be that kind of in a similar situation. But I think the Giants really like to take time with their prospects. I think when you look at Bryce Elrich, he's a little bit of an exception just because he's kind of a freak of nature and the power was always playing out there. But I mean, you can never say never, right? So I think there is a possibility that he sneaks in there towards the back end of, early 2028, maybe 2027. But if I were to have a safe bet, I think it would be 2029, which is crazy to think because I would be close to 30 when that happens. So hopefully, Joshuar, take your time, man. You don't need to get up here anytime soon. But yeah, I would say towards that area, he'd be up there.
When you look at him, because I always think of top 100 prospects, and then there's a lot of talk about Giants dangling some of these guys in trades. And I think Joshuar, even more so than Bryce Eldridge, I've said Joshuar should absolutely not. And it's not to say I don't think, because I've always said no player should be untouchable. If the right package comes up, then you're always willing. But I also feel like if you were to sell Joshuar this year, you're selling low on his stock because he's not the prospect he'll be once he hits stateside, in my opinion. How high do you think he could climb up that list if you're talking top 100? Are we talking a top 5 guy? Are we talking
I think in the future, definitely he could be a top 5 guy. I think when you look at this crop of shortstops right now, I think Jesus Mate, Leo Debris, and Sebastian Walcott are really good examples to show. I think Jesus Mate specifically, because when I first got here at Baseball America, it was actually one of my first days was when we were going over our top 100 rankings, and I got to see the dynamic of what into rating Jesus Mate so high in the top. He was a top 50 prospect for sure, and that was with him not making his stateside debut at all. It was purely based on DSL numbers. And I think Joshuar and Jesus Mate are two different players, but I think they both have the same potential to be able to be there. Look, when you're talking about Joshuar, the Giants, have done a really good job identifying a lot of these international guys. I know, maybe Marco Luciano might be a blip, but there's also different other players too that they've identified that, as you see in our top 30, that's going to get released in January, that have been a lot of product from the international system. And Joshuar and Luis Hernandez, who we haven't even talked of, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on, have been true identifiers. But I think, to talk about your point where you talk about trade chips and stuff like that, I think if we're talking about 2 players specifically that, in my opinion, the Giants should protect because I think they're going to be really, really good, it's going to be Gonzalez, who was the number 2 prospect at Baseball America, and then Bo Davidson, number 3 prospect for us. He was called the JUCO Barry Bonds, and he is a true scouting find. He went undrafted in whatever draft class that he was part of, and has risen his way into the top 100 prospect system. At Baseball America, I don't have the exact number, but I was talking to our manager Matt Eddy about it a couple months ago. It's really rare for any guy that's gone through the undrafted free agent route to become close to a top 100 guy, and Bo Davidson's in the thick of it. I think he has a 5-tool upside, really loud athlete, plus power and speed. The EB has gotten up to 112.5, and he just keeps on continuing to improve every single year. He's a really good player too. So I would pair him and Joe Suarez into those two players that I think the Giants should absolutely not move at all whatsoever, because those guys are going to be really good players. I think other than that, everybody should be available if you really want to make a trade for somebody that's going to, help your franchise make it compete, because that's what the Giants are. The Giants, fans were so spoiled. I saw it in middle school growing up, the 3 and 5 years, and got to see Giants stuff all over, the hallways in my middle school and high school and stuff like that. And I'm sure Giants fans are yearning to be able to do that again. I think if anybody else comes into mind, sure. But Bo Davidson and Joe Suarez, those are two players to build around.
Yeah. Wow. Go ahead, Cody.
I was going to say, and you talked about the Giants, like kind of lack of aggression, we'll call it, in advancing guys. I don't know if you had heard, but I guess some stuff had gotten floated around that with Luis Hernandez, they are actually planning on skipping the DSL with him. So he'll play in Arizona at 17.
Yeah, that's what I heard too when I was down at the winter meetings. I talked to a couple people who are close to him and say it sounds like that's going to be the thing. Which I can recall Leo Debris and Ethan Salas as the two players in the Padres system who skipped the DSL entirely and made it to low A. So it sounds like Hernandez is going to open up in the ACL, which is probably the best bet. I can't imagine a 17-year-old being up in San Jose, California on their own for the first time after moving over from, Venezuela, DR and all that stuff. So I think, and maybe I'm saying that too, because I would really much like to see Luis Hernandez and Joe Suarez play in the same lineup and stuff like that. But I mean, the things that I've heard about him, I haven't got to see him firsthand. But I mean, Ben Badler, who does a lot of our international coverage, is really a pioneer and a trailblazer for the international coverage. I've seen him a lot, and he's just the most polished bat in the upcoming international class. And I mean, he played in a pro league against Venezuelans, right? These are guys 22, 23 years old. Maybe some are as old as me at 26 years old, and he has held his own ground against the pros. Has a really good compact swing, gap power, and he has, for a guy who's 17, he's projected to have 20-plus home run projection. So, I mean, this guy's an advanced player, smart, reliable defender with plus arm, and I think it'd be the most exciting thing for now that everybody's waiting for is for him to see his stateside debut. Obviously not confirmed. Obviously, he has to sign first and all that stuff, but it does appear from a couple people that I talked to that he is going to start in the ACL.
Interesting.
Do you think that, I mean, and obviously I don't know how much you've been able to see him play defensively and everything, but do you think he would stick at shortstop just fine? Or do you think he would ultimately end up moving off? Because I know there's some projections with his body size, like how big he'll get.
Yeah, I think he'll be able to hold it down defensively, but I think the conundrum that comes into play in this case is him and Joe Suarez are essentially going to go up through the system together. And the way I see Joe Suarez, I think Joe Suarez is a great player, but I think his body's going to cap out at some point. Like I said, I haven't gotten to see Luis Hernandez play firsthand. All I've gone to see is videos and stuff like that. I mean, he's built pretty well. But he also has the profile to be able to play third base. He's going to be that big booming bat in the middle of the lineup that's going to be able to make a lot of noise and stuff like that. And I think, with as highly touted as he is as an overall player, I think making the shift over to third base should be pretty standard for him to be able to do that. And obviously, 17 years old, he's going to have a lot of time to develop when that time comes up. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants move him over to third base. But I mean, if you have Joe Suarez and Luis Hernandez both in your lineup, I mean, in a couple of years, that's going to be a really, really good thing regardless of what they're playing, right?
Yeah.
File that under good problems to have.
Yep. It is a good problem. The Giants have drafted a lot of shortstops in the last several years and then the international draft. And of course, it seems like everybody's a shortstop these days. They're the most athletic. But Walker Martin is a kid that came out of high school leading the nation in high school with home runs. And he was, I believe, the second round pick after Bryce, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Cody? Was Walker Martin? He was drafted second after Bryce. Now he's like fallen to, I believe, like 28 on the Giants' top 30 prospects. And I know he struggled a little bit down in the complex league. What was your take when you saw him?
Well, I'll tell you this, okay? So at the beginning of the year, one of my first assignments at Baseball America was to write a 15 MLB prospects who could bounce back in 2025. And I actually wrote about Walker Martin. So this is what I had at the beginning. Martin struggled to move the needle in his first pro season. The 20-year-old went from San Francisco's number 4 prospect in 24 to exiting the rankings entirely after hitting 218, 391, 362 with 128 strikeouts and 312 appearances in the Arizona Complex League in low A San Jose. And when examining a lot of this stuff that I had to do, for him, this was my first introduction to prospects and stuff like that, and how you're able to evaluate it and stuff. I think the biggest thing was him to be able to make more contact. The power was there, but what was concerning was the strikeout rate of 41% that he possessed at the time, right? And, I think he's a player right now that I think has a lot to prove, but also, I think there's a little bit more time with him, like you mentioned. He wasn't, selected too long ago. He's still very young and stuff like that. I think the contact numbers went up a little bit more this year, but it hasn't been the improvement that you necessarily want to see. But I don't think he also regressed the way that a lot of people would have expected to based on the production. I think that's a really good thing. And I think it's one thing I learned about the Giants player development system is they have a really good PD that sees a lot of these areas and stuff like that and work with bat training and in different areas and stuff like that. So I think the most important thing for him was to not regress. And I think that was the biggest thing that happened this year. And I think him being able to perform the way he's going to perform up this coming year, could I wouldn't say could dictate what's going to happen with him next, but also could give you a good trajectory of what type of player to expect as he starts to get a little bit older.
Nice.
What do you got, Cody?
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of, obviously the team as it stands with you guys has 3 top 100s with Bryce, Joshua, and Bo Davidson. Is there anybody in this, and I'm going to leave Hernandez out of this because I almost sounds like foregone, like you feel like he'll get there eventually, but is there any other players that you kind of foresee making that jump in the next, over the course of 26 up into the top 100 in their system?
Yes, there are 3. I want to talk about 3 players specifically, but 2 of them are pitchers. And the reason why I want to mention these guys is I got to see them firsthand, go from spring training to extended spring training to the complex league to low A San Jose in my first year. And, when these guys got called up to low in San Jose, I told all of my friends that are Giants fans in the Bay Area, I was like, you guys need to head down to San Jose to go watch these guys play. And I'm going to start off with Hennis Kayama. I wrote a story about Baseball America about him, during the summer about how he actually had pneumonia right before his professional debut. And it was a pretty bad case, that he had to endure, and the velocity was down to mid 80s on his fastball. A lot of people weren't sure if he was going to be able to be the same pitcher when he came back. And there was a lot of muscle. I think he lost 15 to 20 pounds during that stretch, and then came over to the stateside debut and arguably was one of the better pitchers in the complex league. Has a mid-90s fastball, deep 4-pitch mix, advanced strike thrower for his age, and stuff that dipped a little bit late. But I think strength is going to be key for him. He was 18 years old most of the season, and he has plenty of muscle to add to his body. I know he was part of the group of Giants players that, did the offseason training at Oracle Park that was designed to add a little bit more strength and stuff like that in different areas and aspects of it with different prospects. And I think the world of him. I think he's going to be a really good pitcher. And I think as he continues to develop, if he can add a little bit of zip to his fastball, and I'm talking about maybe 2 to 3 miles, I think he's going to be a really good pitcher. I think he has starter upside, but I think also, there's potential for him to be a leverage reliever with the fallback option. If he's not able to do it, but Kayama's going to be really good. I know from a couple of people that I've talked to, when the Red Sox actually traded for Rafael Devers, Kayama and Keiner Martinez were 2 pitchers that the Red Sox really, really wanted, but the Giants were really, really firm on keeping. And obviously Martinez is our number 6 prospect. Kayama just, ranks outside of the top 10. I think Kayama is going to be a really good pitcher down the road. And I'm kind of, maybe more on him because I was able to actually watch him on my own without anybody putting him on my radar and, where he's at right now. But I think Kayama is going to be a guy that in a couple of years is going to move up there. And another guy, too, that I want to talk about, Luis De La Torre, left-handed pitcher for the Giants, another guy that I wrote a story about earlier in the year, too. Born in Phoenix, but grew up in Mexico most of his life. And, it's funny, the story goes like you can catch the full version of that Baseball America, but basically he had moved to the United States for high school, just to attend high school. And he was just happened to, he was actually going to play for the high school baseball team in Utah. At the high school he was going to. And then COVID happened, and he was just going to work or do whatever, spend some time between Mexico and the States. And then one day was playing in a beer league and was throwing, gas on the mound. And somebody was like, hey, you think you should go try out? You should try to become a professional pitcher. And Luis de la Torre was like, yeah, you're right, I should try it. So he moved to the DR for a bit and pitched down there and, got signed by the Giants there for $10,000. And now you see what he's been able to do in the complex league. It's amazing. He got moved up midway through the complex league. And a lot of that had to do because he had a huge velocity jump, left-handed pitcher with really, really good deception. And I think when you're talking about deception, a lot of times when pitchers rely on deception is because they don't have that high octane stuff. They don't have that premium stuff. That's not the case with De La Torre. I mean, De La Torre has a fastball that's been able to touch 98 miles per hour, and he hides it very, very well for the skill set that he's able to do. Has a good fastball slider combo, but the command, there's a little bit of questions with the command. It's not as consistent as you'd like to see it, but also this is a guy who hasn't been necessarily pitching as long. He grew up playing the outfield actually, but transitioned to the mound, because he's a little bit of an older guy. I think he's 22 years old now.
Yeah, he's 22, yeah.
Yeah, so it would have been an easier path for him to get to the majors through becoming a pitcher, and that's exactly what he did. And really, the key thing for him is he's gonna need to develop a third pitch. I think it's what it is at the end of the day. The fastball slider combo is good. He has a curveball that he throws in every once in a while, but he's gonna really need to be able to develop that third pitch to be able to take it a step up. The one thing I was concerned with him is when you look at his profile, he has more of a reliever profile. But when you get up to San Jose, I mean, he was shoving 5 or 6 innings and just dominating up there, en route for the San Jose Giants to win that, Cal League title. So it was encouraging to see, but I think he should start at high A Eugene this upcoming year. I think he's a really good player to watch. And like I said, if he doesn't, if his profile doesn't hold up to become a starter, I think we could see a setup guy closer potential when it comes to them, especially with that really good fastball at the end. It's just such a good wipeout pitch. And then, the other player that I do want to talk about too, Carlos Gutierrez. I know he spent some time with the injury down there in Los San Jose, but this is a guy that kind of came out of nowhere. A lot of people don't know, but him and Bryce Elrich played against each other in some sort of Mexico versus USA like baseball tournament, whatever was happening. I don't know the exact terminology off the top of my head, but they had played each other before.
Right.
Now they're both within the system. And then when we look at Carlos Gutierrez, I mean, the thing about him, elite bat control, has rare and swing and miss profile, line drive approach, very limited power. But when you're getting on base at the rate that he does, whether it's single, double, or just getting on base, I mean, that's the biggest thing that's been able to propel him so far. So I think in the outfield too, he's a pretty good defender that can handle center field, but based on a couple people that I talked to, he kind of is projected to be able to corner slot, maybe potentially left field. But the biggest thing for him is he's going to need to be healthy. He spent a couple times with injury. He's still really young, 18 years old, still has plenty of time to develop and stuff like that. But there's just been so much progress that the Giants have seen with him, but it just hasn't been able to be a big sample size because he continues to get injured. So, I mean, the way I look at him, he's a table setter, a contact and speed guy that could be, a really good leadoff hitter, a really good 9-hole hitter, but I think as he continues to develop, and I think he is probably the rawest out of this group that I mentioned. All these guys are relatively young, but I think he's the rawest out of all these guys. And I think he has really good potential, but I think if I'm a Giants fan, those are 3 guys that I really want to pay attention to as we head into the next season. And I think 2 of these guys should start in low A San Jose to begin the year.
Now you mentioned 18 on him. I thought he was like 21, Gutierrez.
I think he was 20 last season, I thought, but I could be wrong.
I mean, but he is
Kayama's 18. I think that's
Kayama. Yeah. Now, what do you think of the Giants? I mean, did you get a chance to see Johnny Level? Because he tore it up down here in Arizona.
Of course, I got to see Johnny Level throughout extended and the complex league, so I got to see him quite a bit.
Now he's projected right now? They're saying 29 as well. I mean, a lot of these guys. I mean, the Giants are very. I don't know if they're top heavy at the bottom, I guess, of the system. It seems like they're all either in. Coming up through the complex league or San Jose low A, and they're just getting there. Some guys are heading up to Eugene at high A and starting to get there, but not really much at AAA at all. And AA, I guess what is Bo going to AA next year? Is that where
I think no, Bo was in Double A this year. I think
he was in AA. Will he
he
start there again this year, or you think he'll start?
I
in
think he'll
Sacramento?
start a bit, but I think it depends how also, like you said, the AAA roster is a little bit bleak right now. I think his bat's a little bit advanced, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if you did see him start the year in AAA. But I think AA would be the safest bet for him right now.
Okay,
He got a good stretch there though, because he got moved up pretty, like what,
Yeah.
mid-season.
Yeah,
Couple
now
hundred
he's 23 and a half years old. I saw somebody say he was 24, and I think Cody, you say he's 23.
23
I
and a
mean,
half.
you know, I mean, I'm not saying any of these guys are going to be. You went to Fresno State. Aaron Judge, one of the most famous athletes of all time, Fresno State. How the Giants didn't draft him, I don't understand it, but they had a shot at him. I guess a lot of teams did, but he grew up right here in their backyard, a Giants fan, and they didn't pick him. He was kind of a late bloomer, though. I mean, Aaron Judge, I was comparing his numbers the other day, his first 3 seasons in the minors compared to Bryce Eldridge's first 3. Now, granted, he played in the East, and Bryce played, his AAA season in the Pacific Coast League. So, but in 3 years, Aaron had 360 more bats, but only 2 more home runs, 56 to 54. Slugging percentage, OPS plus was all in favor of Bryce. Batting average was equal, 279 to 278. And Bryce is 4 years younger. Aaron didn't make it to the big leagues. His first full season, he was 25. So when people talk about Bryce and they say, we ought to trade him for this guy to make the Giants competitive, I don't think they realize what they could be giving up. This is a guy that has incredible bat speed. Exit velocity is through the roof. This guy's just different. The ball comes off the bat differently with Bryce Eldridge, and he's 21. Just turned 21 in October, just 2 months ago. So he's going to be 21 the entire 26 season. Even if he takes a couple years to really find himself, he could be a star at 23, 24 years of age.
I mean, that's a really good point, right? Like you mentioned, I feel like there's this added pressure right now because you see a lot of players, specifically within the past couple of years, obviously, I feel like the Angels are an outlier because they push guys to the moon. But even guys like Nick Kurtz, Jack Caglione, Chase Burns, Rhett Loader, these are a couple of guys who got drafted who made their debut within a year or a year and a half of them getting drafted. I feel like even when I was watching baseball growing up and intertwined in the world of prospect coverage, like whenever I watched a draft, I knew I wouldn't see that player for another 3 to 4 years, like you mentioned right now. But now you're seeing like this added extra pressure, and it's, I feel like it's translated to the entire baseball world where it's like, you don't let these guys have a full low A season, a full high A season. They're doing good enough in low A, boom, let's call them up to high A, boom, let's call them up to double A, right? And to each their own. I feel like you have to adapt with the game because that's what's always going to be the case. It's going to be a case of adapt or dying. And I feel like what a lot of teams have seen is that they need to be able to do this, but I think with Elrich, people forget how young he is, but I think I can also see the case for why some people might want to trade him. There's 2 issues with Bryce, and it's the fact that he is blocked at a position, and he's also not very good defensively. He's not a very good defensive first baseman. They tried to put him in the outfield, and it didn't work as much, and you really don't want to have a 21-year-old be your DH only type of thing, So I think those are two dilemmas that when you're talking about Bryce Elrich, that kind of, I would say the bat isn't necessarily holding them back. The defense isn't really necessarily holding them back either. But I think it does have to do with the fact that you trade, you'd make a massive trade for Rafael Devers, who's moved over to first base full time. If there was no Matt Chapman, this wouldn't be an issue, but you have to have Devers and Chapman in the lineup right now. And I think for Elridge, it's kind of, bad timing. A year ago, nobody saw this coming. He'd probably be San Francisco's everyday first baseman at this point. But I think the other issue that comes into play is with the way that he's been moved up so fast and so quickly and has held it down in AAA, to be specific. He's hit in every single level that he's played him. If his bat is just so loud in AAA, it's going to be hard to be like, this guy's 21, let's give him more time of development and stuff like that. If you're the San Francisco Giants, that window of wanting to succeed, especially under the Tony Vitello era now, where there's a lot more expectations happening, you want to be able to pounce on those opportunities and stuff like that. And if you see Bryce as a bat who is going to impact your lineup, you got to find a way to get in there. But also, if you feel like there's not necessarily a way to get there, if you're talking about, I know we mentioned Ketel Marte earlier, I think that's the type of player you trade for it. And you include a player like Bryce Elrich. Obviously, like we saw earlier, San Francisco's not necessarily on the table because it's part of his no trade clause. But I think if the idea of trading Bryce Elrich comes to play, it has to be for a superstar of that level. Like you mentioned, good control, relative contract, and very good at the position too. But I don't know how too many guys out there are available at the moment to be able to sacrifice something like Elrich.
You mentioned something about Ketel Marte on the no trade clause. I read a thing on Twitter. He's been on Cody's show and my show. Jeff Young made a little comment about it today that said something to the effect like, you wonder how many others have heard. I'm paraphrasing here, but without pulling it up, but how many others are on that no trade clause of the Giants? And it makes me think about this because we see these young guys that we're talking about tonight, Joshar and Hernandez is coming. And these guys are 3 to 5 years away. And you got Bryce and Dakota Jordan and, a couple of other guys are coming. But I just don't think any free agent that is a star, I mean, like Willy Adames, I wouldn't put him at the superstar level. I'd put him at the kind of at the top of the mid-level, just above.
He's like
mid.
a 60th grade player,
Yeah. But no superstar type players have ever, I'm not just talking about no one has signed with the Giants in 25 years. Or, you go back to Barry, right? Barry is the only legitimate superstar that signed as a free agent. But it's cold. It's a big, huge ballpark. It's going to affect stars' stats.
That's live in California.
Yeah. It's something that I feel the Giants' only way to really compete is develop their young players, get them to either be, where they're solid trade chips or they make it up to the club. And the Giants won World Series, not with free agents, but they won it with homegrown infield, homegrown pitching, and they added through trades like Hunter Pence, Marco Scutaro, different guys, Freddie Sanchez. It was always a meaningful type of trade. They don't go nobody's coming to San Francisco.
And like you mentioned, like you look at acquisitions in the past, with Hunter Pence, right? Chris Bryant. I mean, I would say maybe Chris Bryant's the closest to a superstar at the time that the Giants had within that respective market, but they were all products of trades and stuff like that. Like it's, right. I will give a credit to the Giants. At least they've tried in the past. They really tried with Aaron Judge, and I know the fan base was fooled with the Arson Judge tweet. Feel bad for you guys, but also, they tried as much with Carlos Correa, and unfortunately all that stuff happened. It's just stuff hasn't gone their way. And I feel like you've seen a little bit of initiative too with Adames and Young Cooley to an extent too. But it's just tough, man. It's really tough. And I just don't know what it is, especially, you think that, especially in the early, I know the Giants had a pretty locked up roster, but, in the early 10s, hitting into the late part of that, like who wouldn't want to be part of a franchise like that? And, with plenty of the free agent options that were available at the time, who wouldn't want to play for a team that it had a certified winning culture, had good clubhouse chemistry. And, it is kind of a little bit of an interesting note. I wish I had the answer for that, but I think the Giants have a good answer in developing a roster, and it comes down to what they have right now in their farm system in the lower level specifically.
Yeah. Here's a specific question for you from one of our chat members. How about Dakota Jordan? How is he looked at by Baseball America?
Yeah, so when I was working at MLB.com, I believe I want to say 2024, I actually wrote a story about Dakota Jordan when he was at the MLB Draft Combine here. And the big thing for him was, I mean, coming out of Mississippi where he went, he was a two-way athlete. I mean, he was supposed to play both football and baseball, but saw a little bit of a better of a future in baseball. And I think the big thing with how, from what we've seen and stuff like that, I mean, huge strength, very loud contact. The exit velocity reached up to 108.4 and, has a aggressive but manageable strikeout rate. And I think that's going to be the big thing for him as he continues to develop, because I feel like swing and miss and chase has always been an issue for him. But he was able to control it a little bit more from what we saw this past year. I mean, he's going to be a ranked prospect within Baseball America. And I think he has really good speed. The arm gives him a chance to stay in center. But the big thing about him, he's going to be a power first profile. And as we talk about with a lot of these power first profiles, the big thing is that they're going to be swinging for the fences every single time. But when you swing for the fences every single time, there's going to be a lot of in zone whiff rate. There's going to be a lot of chase rate. There's going to be a lot of miss rate in general, right? And I think that's stuff that you can get away with when you're playing minor league baseball against dudes who aren't throwing as fast or dudes who can't locate the strike zone. But when you get to the major leagues, specifically in AAA too, and in the major leagues too, these pitchers are a little bit more developed. They're a little bit more better, and they read the scouting reports, they read the film, they know that if they throw even something close to appealing to you, that you're going to go out your way to try to make contact with them. So I think the big thing for him is going to be able to become a better contact hitter, because the power is there. I mean, the power is amazing by far. Like, it's going to be really good. And I believe he's Baseball America's number 7 prospect, by the way.
For the Giants? Okay.
Yeah, for the Giants, yes.
Do you believe with Dakota, is it going to be more of a chase issue or more of a, because I know now it's San Jose, it's a lot of players younger than him. He was a little older for that level. So I remember seeing that his in zone whiffs weren't like as bad as I think a lot of people were projecting when he was getting drafted. Do you feel like it's going to be more of a chase issue going forward, or is it going to be more?
I think in pulling up the data that I have right now, it's going to be the chase issue for sure. I mean, when we look at it right now, the data that I have available right now, 29.8% chase rate. I mean, that's a really high rate. But think if you're looking at Baseball Savant, that has a little bit of blue in there, and obviously that's not as appealing, but it's something that's fixable, especially at his age and stuff like that. He missed 29% of the time, which isn't as bad. In zone whiff rate at 23%. You'd like to see a little bit better, but for a guy with his type of profile, I think that's really encouraging to see. But it's definitely going to be not getting as trigger happy, when he's in a, down in the count and stuff like that, to not be able to face back or anything like that. It's going to be able to be a little bit more timing at it. And the way you fix those things is just working on some strike zone recognition and just not being as much trigger happy as possible. But when you have the power that he has, and sometimes desperation in the count and stuff like that, like it's kind of hard to hold back that swing. But if you want to be an everyday ball player, those are issues that you're going to have to face. And I think with Jordan, I think it's really appealing that he has a 98th percentile exit velocity of 108.4. His max CB was 114 this year, and gets a good contact the barrel rate at a 19.90%. So it's all there. It's just about cutting down the chase rate specifically for him. And I think you could see pretty good. I know he fell a little bit in the draft. Like, I expected him to be like a 2nd or 3rd round talent, and I think he got drafted in the 6th or 7th. And for the Giants to be able to get him at that spot too is really fortunate too.
Yeah. I definitely felt like trigger happy was a very good way of putting it, because it was actually funny watching a lot of their games last year. It almost felt like when he had count leverage, the swing decisions got worse at times, which makes no sense, because it's like he would get ahead 2-0 or 3-1 and he would chase a ball in the other batter's box, because I think it's like he predetermined, I'm going to swing out of my shoes at whatever comes. And it's just very interesting to see.
Yeah. Am I okay? I thought I had myself muted there. Other prospects that
I have one.
Go ahead, Cody. You got one?
Yeah, because you brought up the pitchers earlier, and especially, and also De La Torre, super high character guy. We talked to him a couple months ago, and I cannot stress how accurate your article was on his story. That is an incredible story. But Jacob Bresnahan, he was a guy that jumped way up your guys' list. I think he's up at number 5 now, which I was super happy to see, because watching him last year, I kept like beating the table. I'm like, this guy is not getting enough recognition right now. He, what have you seen from him? What do you kind of feel like his ceiling is? Because I know you talked about developing 3 pitches, and he's a guy that I know he's got the fastball, he's got the changeup, and he was talking to us a couple of months ago about working on the slider a lot this offseason.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the big thing that's going to separate him first. I mean, first of all, to talk about Jacob Bresnahan, I mean, this guy was kind of you might have forgot that the Giants acquired him, in a trade and stuff like that, and didn't have a necessarily best showing in his first year. But now the way you look at him, for being a left-handed pitcher, he's the top arm in the system with a plus fastball that has really good right, and like you mentioned, that plus changeup. But that slider is going to be what's going to need to be able to change. It shows average, but it needs a little bit of tightening. And I think if he's able to really get a hone of that third pitch, I think he has the potential to be a mid-rotation starter if the slider comes. I haven't watched him as much. I was able to obviously digest a lot of the notes and stuff like that. I don't think I got to pitch him in person this year. But in reading through all the stats and stuff like that we have on him, the big thing about him is he throws strikes, strong frame. And, the fastball is really good. And if he's able to change that slider a little bit more, even alter it a little bit more to become more effective, I think it definitely boosts his stock a little bit. So, I mean, this is just credit to Giants scouting for one, and then Giants player development to be able to take this type of player, take this type of guy, and then be able to, ascend him as to one of the better arms in the system. I think that's the beauty about baseball is you're able to get the different forms of walks of life that may not have worked in another organization, but then you see one thing that you like about him, you be able to construct them the way that you want him to. And then he, has a story the way Jacob Bresnahan does.
Nice. He did say the slider is a big point of focus for him this offseason. He's working on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned
acquired in the Alex Cobb trade, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
So, kind of like I would say, I mean, not very much known about him at the time. I just kind of want to stress how the rise of him has truly been, how special he could be of a player for essentially what the Giants got for.
The Giants have actually picked up some pretty decent players in some low-level type trades,
Yeah. Parks Harbor, who came over in the Yankees trade, was a really good acquisition too. I actually wrote a story about him at Baseball America, another undrafted guy. Seems like the Giants have a thing for undrafted guys. And was kind of like the sleeper, the throw-in piece in that Yankees trade. And, first week in Eugene, or first couple of weeks in Eugene, just goes on an absolute tear. The EVs are high. The numbers in the zone, the contact rate is really, really good, and he's hitting for more power. He's a little bit older, I think 24 years old, and barely reached high A this year. He's going to be a guy that I think the Giants would like to push a little bit more because of his age. And I got to see him down in the Arizona Fall League. And the thing that he told me was the biggest thing that motivated him to become the player he is right now was not hearing his name on draft day. That's something that he expected to hear his name. He didn't hear his name. So that motivated him to go in the gym, put in that work, push that P, and be able to put in a position right now where he looks a lot leaner. He looks a lot stronger, and the results are showing. I think the only concern that I saw in the Arizona Fall League from him, and granted, it's just about a month and a half worth of sample, but the end zone whiff rate was really high. I want to say it was north of 40%. And I think that had to do maybe with him knowing that he had a lot of power and wanted to flash it a little bit more. But I think he's going to be a really good player. Where he plays, it's going to be tough. I know he played a lot of first base in the Arizona Fall League because they didn't have a designated first base, so he was athletic enough to play there, but played a lot of third base. And I think he's going to need to see some time in the outfield too, but he could become a player that, becomes a platoon type of player that plays really well, or if he's able to fix certain areas, he could become, close to an everyday player, fourth outfielder for them to be able to do it. So I think Parks has definitely got to be able to pay attention into, and I for sure he'll be ranked somewhere in our top 20 for the Giants if I were to.
Was Parks in that? Was he in the Duvall trade, right?
Yeah, he was in the Duvall trade.
Yeah, and then they got, another guy. You probably didn't get to see him because he jumped straight to AAA, but Tidwell, Blade Tidwell, he might be challenged for one of the starting spots in the, he might be one of the guys the Giants are looking at that could take that fifth spot, whether it's him or Birdsong or but they're pretty high on Tidwell, I hear. So Giants have made some actually under the radar type trades that you think, getting this guy for this guy. I mean, but and what was the other guy, Cody, that they got in the trade to Atlanta, the kid that played at Oregon.
Oh no, it's Ceballos. Sorry, I was thinking of
Ceballos. Now, is he going to be at AAA this year? He was at AA last year. Is he going to make the jump?
Second half.
Yeah, I think there's a really good chance that he's able to make the jump. If not, depending on what they see, could keep him in AA. But I think if he finished in AA, there's a chance that he could be up on the AAA roster, especially a little bit with how depleted it's looking up there. I think they want as many bats as possible to play at Sutter Health Park, which is crazy that it's also a major league ballpark.
Yeah. I mean, I got the chance to see him a lot down in spring training last year. He got quite a few at bats for the Giants. And he was one of the better hitters on the Giants.
It did not translate for the first 4 months of the year, but he had a fantastic last 2 months of the year.
Yeah.
Which is tough.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So another guy, you briefly touched on him. You mentioned his name. I want to get what your thoughts on him. He's the Giants, according to MLB.com, he's the 10th ranked prospect. Kiner Martinez, you mentioned him. Is any of these guys that you've been mentioning, Martinez, Kaema, some of these other, you mentioned, I'm trying to think who the other one, trying to look in here at the list of guys you mentioned. Oh, Carlos Gutierrez.
Yeah.
Any of these guys that you see right now, they're starters, any of them potential closers? Because we saw in the 21 season, the Giants promote two guys that came up through their ranks very quickly. One of them is a free agent now, Gregory Santos. Yeah. The other one got traded to the Cubs in that trade. The Giants needed a shortstop for a few days, and they got some kid from the Cubs. I'm forgetting his name now, but Castro. He was, Kervin Castro. Yeah. He was like a young 21-year-old, was pitching in the playoffs, believe it or not. And then they just fell apart. But any of these guys, can you see any of these guys rise up? And, we saw guys like Treyu Savage last year rise all the way up from A-ball to the World Series. Any of these guys potentially could be a Giants closer in the bullpen that have these live arms that throw 98?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think De La Torre, if he's not able to hone in on his third piece, I think definitely has closer potential. The only thing tough about him is that he is a lefty. You don't see a lot of lefty closers. Josh Hader, one of the few that to name off the top of my head, but I think he has the potential. But I think Kiner Martinez, like you mentioned too. I mean, I look at Kiner for the first time, and he was kind of, I wouldn't say built like a linebacker, built kind of like a college linebacker, like a freshman college linebacker, broad shoulders and stuff like that. And I was like, who is this guy? And then you're able to see what he does on the mound with a mid-90s fastball plus a sweeping slider that's really good, and took a big leap after he had a different grip change and stuff like that, and his changeup is continually improving, and I think that's the biggest thing that he's going to work on as you continue to develop in it. But I think when I'm talking to a lot of different scouts, and scouts, that are sitting next to me as I'm watching them in the complex league and I talk to throughout the year, the big thing is I get a lot of split that's either between, is he going to be a starter? Is he going to be a bullpen? Who knows? But he's going to be young enough to the point where the Giants are going to be able to take that at their own without necessarily pushing them too hard. I think for him, the starter is the ceiling, but if he isn't able to make it out as a starter, he's definitely going to be a power reliever that you put in the 8th or the 9th inning, So I think Martinez and De La Torre are both two of the guys who have the potential to be a closer for them. It's going to be a couple of years, but if I were to bet, I think De La Torre gets there before Martinez, just because he's a little bit older and, kind of want to get that arm in as quick as possible right now.
I know the Giants are needing a closer, and, Will Bednar cleared the Rule 5 draft. No one picked him. Fortunately, I think he's got closer stuff. He's just got to get the ball over the plate. I watched him in the fall league a couple years ago, and he was he pitched a little, then he got hurt, and he's been hurt a lot. What's the report on Will Bednar?
On Will Bednar?
Yeah, is he a guy?
I actually haven't gone to see much just because I don't get to see a lot of the AAA guys and stuff like that just because I'm down here and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So I like to be transparent. I don't like to BS my way through it, but I have
Right.
not seen much of Will
Okay.
Bednar or see much of the reports on him. So
Yeah.
I'm never going to be the type of guy that tries to act and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think it's important
Good.
to have that
Very good.
transparency.
How about these guys up on the screen? Question here from one of the listeners, wondering your thoughts on Jacob Christian and Josh Bostic.
I think I have more on Bostic than I do on Christian right now. And just looking at his profile that I have right now, for the big thing that I think when I look at it, I'm not just talking about him. He's a JUCO guy out of Texas in 2023. And, I always have a soft spot for the JUCO guys because, like we mentioned earlier, I went to Los Alamos College, so I know what that grind and stuff like that is to him.
Go Mustangs.
Exactly. Go Mustangs. Shout out Chris Shipe, which I wouldn't think I'd be mentioning his name on a Giants podcast in the year 2025. But shout out to Chris Shipe. He beat De La Salle when he was with Pittsburgh. But looking at his grades right now that we were able to put on to him, the fastball's a 60, the curveball's a 40, the sweeper's a 50, the changeup's a 55, the control's a 55. And this upcoming year is going to be his biggest test yet, when he heads to Double-A, I think the big thing is if he can able to get a control of his changeup to its full potential. I think he has the potential to be a back-end starter, be a bulk guy. But that's kind of what I have right now on Josh Bostic right now. I don't have a lot on the other guy, Jacob Christian. Don't have much on him, but that's what I was able to gather from the previous notes that I had on Bostic.
Okay.
You may not have seen this guy because he is up in AAA, but he also rocketed through the system in the last 2 years. Did you get any chance to see Trent Harris?
I did not get to see Trent Harris.
All right. I was like, there's a chance you might have caught him in the complex.
I didn't get to see him.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to know, a lot of guys, they seem to, 20 to 80 grade. The grade for most players coming up, is he's got 50 here, maybe a 55, occasional 60, 65. Bryce, I believe, is a 70 on power. Does anybody in Baseball America, I'm not just talking Giants here, but does anybody have an 80 grade in any capacity?
At this, are we talking tool set and stuff like that in general?
Yeah, tool
right
set.
Now?
In just one area. Does anybody have an 80 across baseball? Because I've never seen anybody with an 80.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head right now. We could look at Connor. If there's a guy who maybe has an 80 something, it has to be Connor Griffin, who is our number one prospect. He's as close to an 80 player as possible. I'll actually pull out his grade right now and see what we have on him right now off the top of my head. He has a 70 run. So that's as close to his gets. I think if there is one tool that maybe a player right now currently has, it has to be in speed. I think that's one that's kind of easy to be able to get a track of. If you're fast, I'm sure Chandler Simpson from the Rays at one point was an 80 grade speed. I think maybe Homer Bush Jr. might be as close to an 80 grade speed as possible too. But when thinking about hit tool, fastball, or anything like that, I can't think of anybody off the top of my head that's a straight up 80 at this very moment.
Interesting. Do you have the capacity to look back and see what guys' grades were, like an Aaron Judge before he became a rookie of the year? Do you have any?
Of course I do. I can look up Aaron Judge's profile right now on Baseball
I'd love to hear what he was and just see what him and Bryce. I can read
the whole scouting report for you guys. No worries. When I'm looking at, what year do you want? 2014, 15, 16, 17.
Well, he came up in 16 or was it 16 or 17? He won Rookie of the Year. 17. I think it was 17.
17 he won.
Yeah. What was his scouting report going into let's say 16, 2016?
Let's say 16. Right? So I'll read it. It doesn't have grades right now. But at this point, I do see that they mentioned he had 70 grade power. So just think about Aaron Judge, 70 grade power, even as a guy coming up to the system. But, drafted with the Yankees, drafted with the second round, the Yankees drew first picks in 2023. Judge was sought after. The monster power potential he showed over his 3 years at Fresno State. Go Dogs. After signing for $1.8 million, Judge moved from center field to right field, where his offensive skills profile much better. He wrecked the competition at Double-A Eastern League in 2015, earning a starting spot in the Futures game. Things got a little tougher when he moved up to Triple-A Screen Wilkes-Barre. for the second half of the season, though. As we would expect for someone his size, Judge can hit a ball a long way. Even so, the Yankees laud Judge for resisting selling out for power and become a one-dimensional hitter. He's got more feel to hit than one would expect for a man his size. AAA pitchers found holes in his swing and his performance dipped. He's more athletic than one would expect in the outfield, running well once underway, and his raw arm strength is well above average. Refined mechanics would improve his throwing accuracy. Judge checks all the boxes of a profile right fielder. With Carlos Beltran in the final year of his deal in 2015, there's still time for Judge to head back to AAA to continue refining his skill set before he's needed in the major leagues. The Yankees were unwilling to part with Judge at the trade deadline, and they expect him to be part of the team's effort to get younger on the fly.
Wow.
And that's the type of content you could get at Baseball America. I mean, you could go as far as back to seeing Barry. I read Barry Bonds' scouting reports when he wasn't elected into the Hall of Fame and stuff like that. It's also kind of crazy to see, like if you read that, there was no piece of data there. Data was not available even 2016, 2017. Like, it's kind of hard to believe, but there was no exit velo, there was no bat speed or any of that stuff. You're purely going off of what scouts said. You're purely going about the numbers and just, kind of trying to build a story and stuff like that. So if people look back at the history of Baseball America, the way scouting reports from us were written back in as early as 2010, 1990 or whatever, to where it's at right now, it's vastly changed differently. It's kind of been interesting. I think it's important to know, as somebody who, younger, Baseball America's been around longer than I've been alive. So just learning the history of it and everything that goes to it, I think was important to really understand when it comes to scouting players. Yeah.
Now do me a favor, because Bryce is in the same, this is his 2016 was Judge's basically his third year in the minors. Bryce just completed his third year, even with a injured wrist last year. Hit 25 home runs despite missing some time and had to have off-season surgery to get the wrist corrected. So he was playing in pain, but still showed immense power. What was his scouting report? What's it say right now of Bryce? Because he's basically just completed 3 years, and he's only and I tell people he's 4 years younger than Judge. And I'm not trying to say he's going to have a career like Judge. I'm just trying to get that this guy's got freakish power. And at 21, 3 years removed from high school, it's, to me, I've never seen the Giants actually have a guy come up in the system like this.
So I'll share the grades that we have on Bryce right now. But the hits of 40, the powers of 70, the runs at 30, the fields of 40, the arms of 50. And our BA grade that we have for him is a 65, with the risk of it being average. Average knocks him out by 10 points. So his adjusted grade as a player is 55, which is as closest to maybe a 2 or 3 time All-Star during his career. But obviously if he's able to fix that swing and miss stuff, and specifically in zone, I mean, we could see a lot more coming up.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to me because Judge is 6'7", Bryce is 6'7". Guys that big have that kind of hole in their swing, and can they, fix it? Obviously, Judge is, fixed it in a way. He's adjusted because now he's a 300 hitter.
Yeah, no, it's that's the big thing, even at Judge at his age and stuff like that. It's all about time. I feel like Major League fans just in general, that's the expectation you want. I think the expectation that every team should have is to win the last game of the season, right? And I think that's the expectation that every fan has. And maybe sometimes when it doesn't come into play, fans feel a little bit more frustrated. But this is, he's 21 years old. 3 years ago, 2 years ago, he was in high school. He was doing geometry, U.S. history, whatever people in high school do. There's still plenty of time for him to be able to do that. I think just because you see a lot of players nowadays too, make that transition from the draft to the majors so easily, it's a little bit more of a common occurrence than it was in the past couple of years, or maybe the past decade, or just the entire game in general. I feel like there's a lot of that pressure, but there's still plenty of time. There's still plenty of player development. And I think guys forget that, players still develop. We're in the majors. They have first base coach, they have hitting coaches, they have pitching coaches. These guys aren't just guys with a title. They're guys who have to make adjustments on the fly to be able to put the best competitive field possible. So, I mean, there's definitely still plenty of time when it comes to Bryce and stuff like that. What the Giants do with him, totally up to them in that front office. But I think he still has the potential to be a really good player. And, he's as highly ranked as he is for a reason. And as picked as he was for a reason and performed as well for a reason. Every player has its flaws, but it's up to that player to be able to fix them or reduce them as much as possible. It's always impossible to maybe potentially wipe it out entirely, but I think Bryce is a gamer. Bryce is a guy who has really good makeup, and the Giants are in the business of developing players, as we've seen, as history has shown, so I don't think it's too late to hit a panic button when it comes to Bryce.
Yeah. Cody, let's close it out. Let's have you give us your closing thoughts, questions to Jesus, and then we'll tell more people where they can find Jesus and follow him in Baseball America. Go ahead, Cody.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, the last thing I just wanted to add on Bryce is I think, like, to your guys' point about his age, I think a lot of people forget, like, with how big he is probably still growing in his body, especially with like coordination and everything. Like, it's just, I think Vitello brought that up at his press conference. He's like, this guy's massive. Like, he's probably going to be more coordinated in a couple of years than he is.
Yeah,
now.
and that's the biggest thing that I've learned when I was first talking to scouts at the beginning of the season. They would walk me through what it's like evaluating players, and the big thing is looking at bodies. Sometimes they don't even look at who a player is, when they got drafted, how much they signed for. They just purely do the eye test first on a player to be able to see how much they could develop and stuff like that. And him, Bryce Elridge, like Nick Kurtz too. These are two players who are relatively the same size and are still growing into their body. I think you still see that pattern of awkwardness and stuff like that. I think when Bryce is maybe 23, 24, he'll be filled out his body. Now, that doesn't necessarily say that he's going to get taller than 6'7", but it does mean that at some point, he's going to look more comfortable in his body and stuff like that. And just the overall coordination, the base running, and maybe a little bit more comfortability in the defense comes to show and stuff like that. So he's still very, very, very raw.
Yeah. And then the last thing I was going to ask is, because it was really funny last season, and this is what I love about you guys. It was like instant gratification at the end of the year. A lot of last season, I constantly told people, I'm like, the Giants system is not as bad as you guys think. Like, everybody talks about them like they're one of the worst systems. I think at the end of the year, you guys had them 16th, which was even better than I thought they would be. I thought they'd be kind of like bottom teens. Where do you feel like this is a system that's kind of trending up? I have kind of two questions for you, because one's going to be about their recent draft, but do you think this is a system that's kind of trending up that you think is going to be a pretty dang good system in short order?
I think, especially at this trajectory right now, I think they have a potential to be a top 5 system, not top 5, my bad, top 10 system, as they continue to, as a lot of these younger guys who are in high A, low A, and some of the guys in the complex league, ascend over time, and I think they're in a really good position. I think the Giants, I think Buster Posey has done a really good job implementing a lot of, relying on scouting. That's one thing. When I was talking to Zach Manassi, the general manager of the Giants, at the beginning of the year, we had a conversation at Papago, and that was one thing that he mentioned, was that Buster really is a big fan of scouting, and when it comes to incorporating all these different things and stuff like that. And I think you've seen it in some of the players that the Giants were able to acquire, whether it's through trades or the international system, which seems to be really well. And also to an extent, the Giants are going to have the number 4 overall pick in the 2026 MLB draft. And whoever that guy is, if I were them, I think Justin LeBron. I know Giants fans are going crazy because of that name. Would be kind of insane if he wore number 23 while being last name LeBron. I think there's a lot of really good talent at the top of the draft board, and I think if they're able to reload and continue to develop guys in certain ways, I think they could definitely jump into the top 10, which is much better than where they were a couple years ago.
Is there anyone in this last draft class that you really liked that they picked? It stood out.
The Giants. Oh, I mean, Keelan, I got to see him a little bit more, but I think the guy who's really burst onto the scene this year has been Trevor Cohen. I got to see him a little bit in his first couple of days here before they eventually sent them out. But the bat to ball skill is elite, barely swings and misses, has really good speed instincts and a plus arms. Needs to maybe lift a little bit ball to be able to have more power that way, but has a legit chance to stick in center field. And I think as he continues to grow, as he continues to develop and stuff like that, I think he has the chance to be a power bat if he's able to lift a little bit more and fix the launch angle a little bit. But off the top of my head, he wasn't a guy that stood out. But as we've seen over time, I think Cohen's going to be a guy that's really going to, I think, has the potential to be a breakout guy for the Giants this year.
I said the same thing about him that I said about Gutierrez when I watched him, where I was like,
Yeah.
he just hits.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned LeBron for next year's draft. I'm just looking here at a mock draft that's already come out. They got him going to the Twins at number 3, shortstop out from Alabama, of course, who Tony knows obviously very well. Another guy that he would know pretty well, just being around college, who's projected at this point in a mock draft, is Drew Burress, the power hitting outfielder from Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I've liked Drew Burress's profile for a while. I think when I was working at MLB Pipeline, I wrote a story about him and talked to him on the phone. I think similar to him, very good hitter. If you see, he is not a top 5 prospect according to a lot of places, and that has to do with being a power hitter. Does come with a lot of swing and miss issues, which is a little bit concerning. But wow, he is as power as it gets. And in looking in our mock draft at Baseball America, we have our draft writer Carlos Colazo, who does a great job with the draft coverage every year, has the Giants selecting AJ Garcia from Virginia. And describes him as an imposing and physical hitter with a combination of contact ability and power that could turn him into a middle of the lineup force. So that's encouraging to hear as time goes by. But I think there's also a couple other names too. Obviously, Rock Chalowski is going to be one of one, unless I know there's the. But right now he's one of one, and we haven't had a one-on-one in the draft in quite some time. It's always been split, but he is, this was the Rock lottery. It wasn't the MLB draft lottery. It was the Rock lottery, and obviously the White Sox are going to be recipients to that. If everything,
yeah, we came close.
Yeah, that was every time. I cannot believe. I was standing next to the Giants beat writers when they were there. We were just all looking at each other like, "Is this really going to happen? Are they going to sneak their way in to be the number one?" But
never has happened in the history of the franchise.
Yeah,
I'm just glad we're not 13th. All right.
Yeah. But I think another player too that if the Giants wanted to take to maybe save a little bit of money, I think could be Tyler Spangler, the shortstop from De La Salle.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's, the thing is he has a hard commitment to Stanford, but is going to be a top 15 pick. But I think if the Giants wanted to draft somebody like him high above, give him a little bit of an underslot than he was originally going to get, and then spend him a little bit more in the rounds 2 to 5 to be able to get, a couple of players and stuff like that, they go that route too. But I think, if Derek Carrillo from LSU is available, Liam Peterson, a right-hander out of Florida, Sawyer Stronsider, outfielder from TSU, Cameron Fluke, right-hander from Costa Rica. I think there's a lot of really good options. I definitely think this draft class is stronger than last year's draft class. Definitely not. I don't think it's anywhere what 2024 was, but I think there's a lot more options here for what the Giants could do. They want a guy that they could ascend into the majors within a year or two. You can go with a college guy if you feel comfortable with your development system and what you guys got up top. You could, but as we mentioned, the Giants are a little bit depleted when it comes to the upper levels. I think drafting a more ready bat up there would be the wise move for them. But a lot could change between now and July when the draft happens. The whole landscape of how the draft is broadcast changed. So who knows?
A lot could change if LeBron falls maybe to 4 and he's available there. I know there's this high school pitcher that is probably the top pitcher right now in the draft, according to a lot of people, and that's Carson Bowman. The kid's, I think he's like a 6'4" kid, lefty, got 4 pitches, got really good control, but he is a high schooler. So whenever, the last giant lefty that the Giants picked out in the first round, lefty, did pretty well. Madison Bumgarner made it to the big leagues at age 20. Bowman is, a guy that a lot of people like. I don't know. A lot will change. We still have a full season to watch, and who knows? Maybe Tchaikovsky will have a horrible year at UCLA and he'll fall to 4.
Yeah, who knows? He was born in Vallejo, but grew up playing baseball here in Arizona.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, hey, guys, this has been a great show. We appreciate Jesus coming on. If you guys want to read his stuff, go subscribe to Baseball America. You can get it on a digital platform. You can also get it in the magazine. I'm an old schooler guy. I kind of like having the magazine in my hands and flip through it, and I can read it. Plus, my eyes get crazy if I do too much screen time. So, but go subscribe to Baseball America. You can do it. Just Google them, right? Pretty much.
Yep.
And
baseballamerica.com/subscribe. It'll all be there. I know we just had a Black Friday sale, but I think our next sale might be President's Day if anybody wants to hold off till then. But the more the merrier. We're also putting up our handbook. This is the 2025 version with Roman Anthony on the cover. Connor Griffin's going to be on this upcoming cover. This goes out and has literally every single top 30. Projected lineup, depth charts, and all that stuff. I think it's always a good bang for your buck, and it's always nice to have on hand. Reading if you're a big baseball aficionado. This was like the Bible of baseball for a very long time. So we have that going on, and we're doing really good coverage out here. I do a lot of coverage out of the complex here. There's nobody. I'm proud to say that there isn't anybody else doing the coverage at the complex that we do here, and it's going to continue being that way. Big first year at Baseball America, learning the ropes of player evaluating, talking to player development scouts and all that stuff, and I'm ready to take it to next year. I'm going to enjoy the off season. It's going to be nice chilling and spending time in the beautiful Phoenix weather, which I know it's 40 degrees in San Francisco in the Bay Area. It's been 75 here, and I've enjoyed it so far.
Yes,
so
it's been a nice week.
But once the end of January rolls around, it's going to be all gas, no brakes with it when it comes to the complex stuff. So be sure to subscribe at Baseball America.
Yeah, definitely go subscribe. I love that book that you just showed. Reading through all those things. Like I say, there's a different feel when you're going through a baseball, a book versus digital, in my opinion. It's kind of like if you're keeping score at the ball game. You're not keeping score digitally. You're keeping score on a scorecard, and it's just different. I mean, baseball is it's just a different sport to me. It's just to me, it's the most.
I like consuming physical media. Like a lot of people, like I'm 26, and like a lot of older people think that I didn't grow up with physical media, but I remember reading the Contra Costa Times at my local laundromat whenever we would go down, or like whenever I was on BART going to an A's or a Giants game, they'd have it there and I'd get a copy of it. But like physical media is great. And as you guys can see, we have a different collection of stuff right here. Yeah. We also have these archived on our website. So I know there's a San Francisco Beauty by the Bay cover and a couple other ones. I recently gifted my friend on IE a Buster Posey one when he was in San Jose. So we also have those down there. If anyone's ever interested, we have an archive of everything that's available right there.
Awesome. Yeah, that's the way to go, man. Digital, I mean, not digital, but real print. I still got in my scrapbook that I get from my kid, Concord transcript. I got highlights of my, how many points I scored in this game, or kicking the winning field goal against Pittsburgh High School. I just had to get that last dig in one more time. I won't tell you about the missed kick that I made. Well, I just did to tie the game, to win the game, an extra point, and you win them and you lose them sometimes as a kicker. But anyway, it's been great. You guys go check out Jesus Cano, Baseball America. Go subscribe. He does a great job. You'll see his articles, and you're pretty much, I know you're covering all of the complex league, but are you assigned to one team more than the other?
So for our top 30s, I do the Rockies and the Mariners. Those are my top 30 teams. But on the Baseball America coverage, I try to focus on the entire Cactus League. So I'm pretty dialed in when it comes to the Cactus League side, complex and stuff like that, whenever needed to help out on our, the grapefruit teams or whatever stuff like that. But we actually surprisingly have a good New England contingency and North Carolina contingency that takes care of that. So me and Jacob Redner, our college writer, are the only guys on this side of the country. So we do a lot of this coverage out here. But yeah, whatever, complex, anything out of Arizona, I am whether it's college too, I'm there. My Twitter is Jesus_Cano88 if anybody wants to follow. But be sure, if you can, subscribe to Baseball America. Just like the Giants say, nothing like it, right?
Nothing like it. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching the show. We will catch you on the next one. And, don't forget, go follow Jesus on Twitter. You'll see a lot of his stuff there. Jesus_Cano88. Cano, Cano 88, right?
Correct.
So it's at Jesus_Cano 88. Go follow him, give him a follow, and you can read up on a lot of things that he posts there. So take care, everybody, and we will catch you later on in the week. Take care.
Take care, guys.
All right. Good night, everybody. Catch you on the next one. Go see Cody's show on Friday night, Cody.
It might be Friday night. We might be shuffling it a little bit this week. I think we might be doing Saturday morning, actually, shockingly.
Okay. All right.
We'll see.
All right. Very good. All right, guys. Take care. We will catch you on the next one.